Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to introduce our first guest for our talk show. And today we're going to learn a little bit about what it means to have a headless CMS. And we have this really cute introduction animation. Hi, Ondrej. How are you doing today?
Hey, that was cool animation. I wasn't expecting that. I'm very good today. How are you, Shreya?
I'm really good. I'm really excited to have you today over here. So you're actually going to be the first guest in my Tech Talk series. The goal for this is really just for me to introduce new topics in tech for myself. I'm pretty new to tech. I only really started working like 2 or 3 months ago. So there's like a lot that I need to catch up on and learn. So I really just love the fact that I got an opportunity to talk to someone like you, who's a seasoned engineer who has been in the industry for a while and knows a lot more than I do. And then I also wanted to take an opportunity to bring this content out to other students that are interested in getting involved as well. I think it's really important to kind of talk a little bit about your journey and what got you to where you are today, because obviously it's usually never a straight path.
Sure. Hey, I'm Ondrej. I'm currently a Developer Evangelist for Kontent by Kentico. Our main product is the Headless CMS Kontent. And well, if you want to go to the start of my journey, you'd probably go back to when I was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. And it started with PHP. Like I was the kid who was doing the websites, and I was tired of always typing the HTML. So I learned PHP and MySQL and all the LAMP tools that were there at the time. Through that, I actually ended up on university for where I studied IT. Not that it would be any help, because I already knew what I was going to do when I left those studies. After that, I actually started working for a digital agency based in Vienna. That was a very good experience because I met one of the most inspiring people that I ever met. My senior, how would you call? I would call him my boss at the time, but he was really inspirational, and he let me do a lot of mistakes. Yeah, I was back then. I was a .NET developer, and he was not afraid to let me fail, and he was not afraid to let me make those mistakes and have them on production. Which was a really great lesson, yeah, because I could learn from my mistakes, and I learned a lot there. And then I switched jobs. I went back to my hometown, Brno, Czech Republic, where I'm currently, and I worked for Kentico as a consultant. Because I learned, during my very short 1 year experience, I learned that development is not something that I want to do full time. So I came back as a consultant, and I was kind of a translator between the developers or our clients and our development teams. Yeah, because they both spoke a different language. So I was doing that job for about 3 years, and then I switched to developer evangelism because I still wanted to do some development. I wanted to also get better at presenting, at maybe speaking at conferences and so on. The consulting job was very focused on the product, but I wanted to innovate. I wanted to learn new tools. I wanted to learn new technologies and explore the field a bit. So this role of developer evangelism allows me to do exactly that. I never go too deep on a single tool, but it lets me explore the new technologies that are out in the field and then present the results. So that's how I arrived here, and I've been doing that for about 3 years now.
That's incredible. Okay, so you mentioned that you started coding at 9. That is so cool. Could you kind of tell us what got you into coding at such an early age?
Yeah, I think that back then it was just, I mean, I was fascinated by the web. Yeah. Back then we didn't have internet like now. I have a 200 megabit connection, but back then it was 56 kilobits per second. It was dial-up connections. I don't even know what I was doing there. Like it was so cool that everyone wanted to have their websites, and it was just a set of HTML files. No server processing, nothing. It was so expensive to actually host those sites. Yeah, it's incredible what we have now for free. Back then we had to pay a lot of money for it. So I guess I just was fascinated by all of this, and I learned how to do these things. Like I used to work with FrontPage, with Dreamweaver. Yeah, those were the tools for building websites, and the code it generated was so awful. But yeah, that was where I learned the basics of HTML. And it just went from there. Then it was PHP. I built some websites for my friends, and with highly unoptimized SQL queries that were open to SQL injection and everything. So that's how we learn, right?
Yeah, that's so something that really interests me is like education in general, and how I feel like technical education is something I personally think that should be brought to students at a much younger age. Do you think that the fact that you started learning it at that age kind of changed the way you think about code, and how that puts you at a stance when you're thinking about code versus someone who would have started learning much later in life?
Definitely. Like what I always say about code is, it's not about the code itself. Yeah, it's about how you think. And I always say that if you're capable of decomposing a problem and then composing it back again, you're gonna make a great developer. Because everything else is just the rest around. But if you have this one ability, and of course you're willing to learn, because there are a lot of situations where you cannot find any documentation, any code, and you don't know where to go. So that's of course something that you have to move on from. Regarding the age, I think that if you start young, it doesn't matter if you start with, like I started with Pascal, I think, at school, yeah, and of course PHP at home. But it doesn't matter like with which language you start, as long as you can practice the design thinking. I would say the thinking that lets you think about the problems but decompose them, because one big problem you can never solve it. Once you can learn about how to do these things and how to think like the computer does, everything becomes much clearer. And of course, the sooner you start with this, the easier it's going to get. Because when I started young, and I learned the basics of PHP, and it was back then it was PHP 4, I think. Yeah, there were no nice features like we have now. And I had to learn all the functions, and when you had the function, it wouldn't do what you needed, and you had to tweak it a bit. So I learned a lot from this. And when I started having courses at school that were for everyone, that was really easy for me because I already knew everything. Yeah, the professors, they didn't have anything to teach me, because I already knew all those things, like SQL, another great thing. Yeah, the structured query language I learned from MySQL, and they're all pretty much the same. Yeah, if you have PostgreSQL, if you have MS SQL, you still get the basics, how you want to get the data, and then you can just adjust the syntax. So I always say that it doesn't matter like what you can do, as long as you have the thinking.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like in my experience in college, I was one of those students that didn't know anything about computer science going into it, and then freshman year of college I'm like, why is everyone else so good at this? And I would think of it as a like, oh, they're so smart, they already know how to do this stuff, but I never thought of it as they just have had more time, coding, so they know how to think like a computer. And instead of trying to build those skills, I was so focused on just getting the assignments and making sure it got a good grade. So it definitely is important to hear that from you, especially for someone who has been coding from a younger age, to say, okay, no, your focus should not be being able to code well. It should be understanding how that computer works and being able to think like it. Yeah.
The most important thing that I enjoyed as a young developer, you could say, is that when you have a problem, and I wasn't learning coding at school at first, yeah. So I was setting out my problems for me when I was building the websites. The most important thing was to get the problem done. Once you solved the problem, and you knew that it was you who solved it, right? And you have the feeling like you hit that F5 button, it refreshes the page, and it shows what you were meaning to show. It shows what you wanted to do. The SQL query is giving you the data that you wanted. The feeling that you get from it, that you build this and you made it possible. It doesn't matter how. Yeah, it just makes sense that you've done this, and it makes you so feel so good. Yeah, like you were able to decompose the problem, to compose it back, and you were able to instruct the computer to do what you wanted, and it's a great reward. And I think that a lot of developers are motivated exactly by this reward, because they can get the thing done. And so I think that that's the biggest motivator. And that's what is going to keep you moving forward.
Yeah, and that confidence builds over time. You also did mention that something you learned pretty early on that was important is like the power of making mistakes, or being like the importance of being able to do that in a safe place, where it's okay. So could you talk a little bit more about your experience making mistakes? Do you still make mistakes today, and how is that like?
Well, 90% of what I do are mistakes, because you have to fail in order to succeed. Yeah, there's just no way around it. Like if you but I don't think this applies only to code. Yeah, it applies to pretty much everything in life. Like how many things you were able to done perfectly when you were doing them for the first time. Yeah, it's really vital to be able to fail. And with computers, it's really easy to fail because it doesn't cost you anything. Yeah, it costs you just your time, and it's a great education. But like a few things that I learned early on was, if you break something, it's good. Don't be afraid to break stuff. Only the way how you learn is if you break it and then you put it back together. Learning from my own mistakes was one of the best things that happened. Another thing that I learned the hard way, I would say, is about tests. As long as you build stuff, and actually a lot of things that I'm doing right now, because I'm trying to innovate and I'm looking at new features and new tools. I don't cover many of those things by tests, because whenever I build a website or something, it's mostly a sample app or something that is not really on production and earning money. So I don't write too many tests. But when I was working on a serious project, the tests, unit tests and integration tests, both of them, are something that gives you a lot of confidence. So you were asking if, or you were saying that I'm a confident developer, but I'm not a confident at all. Yeah, like I know that whenever I write some piece of code and it runs and it gives me the right result on the first try, I'm always thinking that there's something wrong. Yeah, it never works like that on the first try. Yeah, so actually unit tests and for the low level, when you're building modules, or the integration tests when you're building something bigger, is really something that gives you a lot of confidence, because when you change something and you run all the tests and they are all green, then you know for a fact that everything is running the way it's supposed to. So at the end, when I was working for the agency, I was actually adopting the test-driven development, when I would first write tests and then I would write the implementation. I would let everything fail and then I would start writing the actual implementation, because it gives you much more confidence, and you know that when all tests are green, you can ship without worries.
Okay, so that's also interesting, because I feel like, at least nowadays, when you're learning computer science, you're so focused on just building that answer, building that solution, that a lot of students were not like taught to think in that way, to think about tests and like what we need to even be looking at for that solution. So how did you get your brain to think that way, where you were like, no, I really need to be focusing on those tests first?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like when I was at the university, I remember a lot of students that actually passed all the tests, and they had no idea what is a unit test.
Yeah.
So I learned this lesson by actually doing it. I don't think that there can be 100 people telling you that you should write tests, and if you're not confident, or if you're not thinking the same, then you will never write them, because a lot of developers see them as something that just steals their time, and they can get more features done if they don't do this. So yeah, I think that this everyone has to learn this for themselves. But I'm sure that you also know the feeling, like when you're publishing something to production, and you're like, fingers crossed, everything's going to go well, and I hope that this is going to be fine. As long as you have tests there, you will never pray again. Yeah, because you know it will work.
Definitely. It brings like a certain sense of assurance in your own kind of solutions as well. I like something that you said earlier about making mistakes. It's going to stick with me. It's like how you learn by breaking things. And obviously in coding, you're not like really permanently having any damage when you break things. So you learn by breaking and putting things together. Um, But okay, let's take a little bit of a different direction and go back into the journey that you spoke about. So you said you started from .NET development and then you moved over to developer evangelism. Could you tell me what is .NET developer and like what does that job look like? What did you have to do for it, and what made you want to switch tracks?
Right. So the .NET developer is the typical day is you go to work, you open Jira, you look at your tasks, and you code them. Yeah. Of course, if the internet goes down and Stack Overflow is not available, then you can go home because there's not much to do for you. Yeah, it was. I don't want to say stereotype because there can be very interesting tasks that you're responsible for. But over time, there is a lot of tasks that are pretty much the same, and it's all about getting things done. Yeah, getting things done for the customer so that the customer is happy, so that the solution works for them, and everyone is happy. Yeah. So it's pretty much like that. Like you would a big part of the job is also looking at optimizations. We were working with Entity Framework with MS SQL databases. So we were looking a lot at optimizing those databases. We were communicating with external agencies that were specialized in those optimizations. So it's a lot about exploring that one field. So you're focused at the .NET, and you're getting really good. Even after 1 year, I felt that my experience was very good in that field. And it's also a nice track. Like if you know that code is something that you want to do, it's a great thing to just pick one platform and stick with it. Yeah, just learn all the little things and little differentiators of that specific platform and get really good at it. But it was actually when my boss left and when I got a new developer in my team, one of my great friends actually, um, that he showed me that he was much better than I was. Yeah, at the time he was a senior developer back then. He had a lot of experience, and I learned that I will probably not be ever as good as him in that specific field. So I thought if that was what I wanted to do, and that actually led me to the consulting job because I knew that my position was a bit further from the code because I was able to communicate with customers. I was able to communicate with project managers quite well. That's something that the friend of mine, wasn't able to do at all. So I figured, all right, maybe that's another direction that I could explore, where I can actually find solutions for those people because a lot of the clients, they don't know what they want. They just want to focus on the end result. And once they start getting ideas how the program should work, it's not the best way of moving forward. Yeah. So I was kind of in the middle of the development team and project management, and that was working very well, which led me to the consulting job, which was very similar, but the client was actually external client, and the developers were working for the external client. And yeah, I was able to leverage my experience there and gain more experience on the soft skills side of things.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really important point that you brought in as well just now, Ondrej, about how like you realized what you wanted to do or rather what you didn't want to do just based off of your teammates and like a certain sense of competition. And I don't think people talk a lot about that in tech in general, right? Often it's very like, oh, you do what you want to, you do like what makes you happy. But in reality, like often the people that you're around can really help you realize what's best for you. So do you have any advice for either students that are young and that are just getting into tech and trying to figure out what they want to do with their career, or they have been in tech for a couple of years and they're kind of at this stage where they don't really know what to do with their lives, but they're too scared to kind of make a decision to switch over to a different track?
Yeah, I can see how they would be scared a bit. Um, this has multiple ways how we can look at this problem, right? If you're a student and you're thinking about which tech to jump into, which would be the best tech to learn first, I would probably start at sites like FreeCodeCamp that allow you to make really good choices from the start. They have a lot of really, really good content for students that are just starting, and they can advise you in that sense. Yeah. If you're a bit more experienced, I would say do what you like. If you try 4 different platforms and you like one better, think about why do you like that one better, and focus on that and do that. Of course, if you're actually looking for a job and you have things like mortgage and kids to feed and so on, it's not that easy. You always have to take into account what companies around you, what digital agencies around you are looking for. Yeah. I'm for a long time I'm in the JavaScript field now, and you know that there is always the question, like, what should you do more, React, Vue, or Angular? Yeah. And the question I always say, like, the question is, do what you like, because any agency would be happy to have you if you have experience with any of those. But in the end, it's what the agency uses, it's what the client needs, and that's what is probably the best and the safest bet. But there's also one other aspect that I like to present, and a lot of people actually forget about it, and that is what people around you think. Like we at Content, we have small improvements. We have quarterly reviews with our bosses, and not like many people just see it as my boss will give me a review of what I did for the past 3 months. But for me, it's not at all about that. Yeah, it's about talking to your boss about your personal development, what he sees in you, where you see yourself, and it's a really valuable advice. Like, I think that, as you said, like, people don't talk about this very much, but at least in our company, I see so many really bright minds around me that whenever I need help with a decision that I'm about to make, I always turn to them and ask them what they think. Yeah, and who is better fitted for the job than your boss, who sees how you work, and they can actually give you really good advice, and they can move you in terms of personal development really a lot forward. Yeah, but a lot of people, they are afraid to ask, or their bosses like are afraid to tell them something, to not to be taken it in the wrong way, and so on. So I would definitely say, like, if you've been in tech for quite some time, go ahead and ask your boss what he thinks, if he's in the tech for longer than you, and maybe they will give you great advice. Like, me personally, I'm still in touch with one of my bosses from 5 years ago, and when I'm looking for career advice, I'm asking him too. Yeah, because we have that relationship, and I value his advice.
What do you do today? Like, what does your job look like now?
That's yeah, it differs day from day. Yeah, like no day is the same. Like, for the past week, I've been playing with Nux 3. For the next days, I'm gonna be looking at GraphQL and the ways how you can use it. So it's every day is different. The important part of it is um, to find ways to tell developers how to properly use your product, how to make sure that they leverage the most of it, and make sure that they are using the right tools with it. Yeah. And we do it by many channels. Yeah, like we do have open source repositories on GitHub. We're doing videos, we're doing conference presentations, we're doing I'm sure you've seen the video series that I have on YouTube. WTF is. So that was also like, I'm trying to introduce the tech tools and make sure that people understand them, and this was also a product of that, because there is a lot of terms around. Like, you mentioned Jamstack, I mentioned React, Angular, Vue. Maybe there are people watching that don't know all these things. Yeah, and then I imagine that you would go to YouTube and look for what that is. And whenever you try to look for a term like this, you get a lot of Google pages, and somehow everyone in the discussions seem to know what that is, but you just cannot find what it is, right? So that's also a part of my job, to help people understand these things. And as more people, actually more beginners, come into the field, I know how it can be frustrating to see everyone, they seem to understand that term, and it's actually embarrassing for you to ask what that is, because you would look like a complete beginner. So people are afraid, and that's bad. So that's what I'm also trying to do, like educate people what they want to know, and I'm trying to do it in an easy way. So it's easy to understand, no special terms, just easy English. Show them what the tool is about, so they can make better choices. And then of course I handle our blog at content.ai/blog for developers, and we have also a profile on dev.to where we publish some technical content. So yeah, it's all about the technical stuff, and how to educate and show people what they can do.
Yeah, I think like not enough people talk about like the power of developer evangelist, because obviously there's, like you mentioned, there's so much information on the internet now that you can barely kind of tell what's real and what's not real. And then as a developer evangelist, you have to be that person that's putting out content and like rising above all of that information and being like, hey, listen, that's great, but if you try to sort through all of that information, you're going to waste a lot of your own time and you're not going to learn anything. And then you also have to make it understandable, simple to, comprehend. You have to make sure that it's relatable. So there's a lot that kind of goes into your job in itself. Could you kind of give us a brief introduction into what a headless CMS is and how that's different to a traditional one?
Sure. Yeah, that's a topic for 1.5 hours at least. But yeah, we can definitely go through that. Like a traditional CMS is something that you install on your server, and that contains administration of your website, and then it contains the website itself, right? So it's all built by a single monolith. Like monolith may be a fancy word. So let's say it's one package that you install somewhere and it works. Yeah. Headless CMS on the other side is cloud hosted. So you don't, at least the majority of them. Yeah, of course, there can be some that are hosted on premise, but let's not overcomplicate things. Let's say it's a headless CMS is cloud hosted, so you only register, and you don't handle all those painful tasks like maintenance, updates. You don't have to pay for the hosting. You don't have to worry about firewalls, anything. You just register. You define your content model. Those are the content types that you want to use, right? It's just like we create classes in code. These are content types are the templates for your content. Yeah. So one content type could be article with the fields like title, content, author, and so on. You define everything in the CMS, and then the content is available to you via API. So you can, if you're building a website or if you're building an application, you're building, let's say, a desktop application or an application for your phone, you can still consume the same API. So the great advantage is you're not only focused on a single channel, which would be the website, but you can reuse the content on all the devices, all the not devices, but applications that you're building. Yeah, and yeah, the way how this works is it also goes through the CDN, so it's not a single point of data, but you have a lot of nodes around the whole world that actually serve your content. And while a lot of people present this as the main advantage, like the way that you have a single source of content to multiple channels, a lot of developers are still focused on the website kind of things. Yeah, and they say, all right, the multi-channel is nice, but I'm just working on a website. And they don't see the benefit there. So I always say, think about a restaurant or a delivery e-shop that has some opening hours. Yeah, Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to let's say 6 p.m. And you have that as one single content item in the CMS. And when you need to change it, you change it only in a single space. While if you have it in a traditional system with components, with unstructured content, you probably have to work through the CMS to find all the places where this is actually mentioned, and you have to change it on a lot of places. Yeah, so that's how we can bring the benefit of multi-channel back to that system. So yeah, I would say that that's the core of the headless CMS.
Yeah, so that seems like something that is too good to be true, right? Like, why is everyone not jumping to use this?
And people are, I think. Just give them a bit more time. Obviously, as with other any other service, There are CMSs that are more developer focused. There are CMSs that are more focused on editors and their experience. There are cheaper solutions. There are enterprise level solutions that give you other features, like very advanced workflows. Because content editors that actually go in and change content, I know it doesn't feel like it, but they're very demanding. They require to have the same features they have on the traditional systems, where they have the WYSIWYG editors, where they can make the color of the text green, and they can make it bold and everything. So they are bringing it back to the Headless CMS, and us as a vendor of a Headless CMS, we actually are responsible for ensuring that their experience is the best that we can do. Yeah. I think that a lot of people are actually going towards these CMSs. Developers was the force that actually made it possible, because headless CMSs were first adopted by developers. And of course, it depends what your project is and what are needs of the project. Yeah, if it's just you working on it, I'm sure that you're perfectly fine working with Markdown files. But if it's going to be your mother or someone who doesn't have the technical mindset, it's going to be really challenging for them. So there's a lot of headless CMSs on the market, and every single one is better at something that they pose as the best feature. And it always depends on what your project needs.
Yes. I love that. I love that it's making things not only easier for both developers and non-developers, but also kind of like that communication between the two of them so that they can work together better. And you mentioned that there's different types of CMSs and they're all offering different features. How is Kentico by Kontent different to any other like competitor that you have, or Kontent Kentico? Sorry, I said that
right. No problem. Well, we are focusing on the enterprise market. Yeah, we are we're trying our best to figure out the best way how to work with content for both developers and content editors. So we're constantly introducing features that bring the content back to both of these personas. Yeah, like for developers, we've just introduced GraphQL. We've completely rebuilt the RJS and .NET SDKs. We're building sample apps. We have a first-class plugin or integration with Gatsby. So we're doing the best we can to allow developers to not waste time with tasks they shouldn't be, but really focus on the website implementation. On the content side of things, I know that content editors are really looking for features like very complicated workflows. They need to have a very granular role setting, yeah, so that they can. Large organizations have a lot of content managers, so they need to be able to define this very granularly. So it's features like that really make the content editing experience the best.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Is there any reason why certain customers or clients out there are hesitant to using a headless CMS?
Yeah, a lot of reasons. I actually did a presentation on this very topic earlier this year. The biggest problem that we saw at the beginning of the year, it's slowly getting better as the tools mature, mainly the JavaScript tools, because they are right now the trend is Jamstack, and the JavaScript tools that are enabling Jamstack on JavaScript are pretty much leading the tech space here. And the biggest problem was the preview, because editors previously were used to just hitting a preview button, and they would see the whole website as it would look like. Because when they publish a content item, they don't just go home, right? They actually wait for the website to publish the item so they can see how it's going to look like. Yeah, because they are responsible for the content and they cannot afford a mistake to be published there. So they wait to make sure that everything's nice and shiny. While when the preview took half an hour of a new build, and then when they published it, they had to wait for half an hour again until the changes are live on the website. That was a major blocker for them. Yeah. So before there is still a lot of people that are hesitant to switch to headless CMS, mainly because they are afraid that they're going to lose some features that they currently have. Yeah. So I think that would be the biggest blocker. Of course, when they see the benefits, they may turn around as long as you give them the benefits. Yeah. Developers were also reluctant to switch to headless CMSs with larger projects because the tools were just not ready for it. Yeah. If you had a website that had tens of thousands of pages, the builds were just too long. And it took a long time. It was actually unpredictable when a specific change will be published. But those things are actually being addressed right now, and the tools like Next.js, Gatsby, and others, they're working really hard to make sure that this is not a problem anymore, and the tools are maturing very quickly. So I think that's if someone is afraid to go that way now, it's probably going to happen in 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years.
And what are some like common use cases? I know e-commerce is definitely like a big one, but are there any other use cases that you've noticed are popular in the field?
I would say pretty much any use case. Like if you're a large organization, and I think that we see it mostly from large organizations because there is the biggest pain. If you have content spread over multiple tools, the content teams are constantly bothered with finding the content and changing the content in a lot of places, and it makes them be not productive. It makes them inefficient. In the end, it all costs money. You can go even beyond money. It causes the people to lose motivation because they don't want to spend their time at work on boring tasks. Yeah, they want to create content. So I think that these organizations, they feel it the most, that they want a single source of content, and they want the editors to have a great experience while working with content, because it will all go back, and their employees will be happier, they will be more productive. And in the end, if they can pay for one single product and they can have a business relationship with single entity that's responsible for hosting the solution, for delivery of the data, and there are SLAs, and the tool is certified and everything, it's much easier for them to handle their core business and not to worry about how to deliver content.
Right. So it's not even like just a content management tool at this point. It's also like a teamwork tool, because if you just have one person, it doesn't matter. But if you're planning on really growing your company or your team, then it's going to make a large difference in the future.
Yeah, that's I hear this a lot. People say that it's just the content management. Like, what's the deal? Yeah, why am I supposed to, like, the enterprise deals? It's us. It's Contentful. It's Content Stack. These tools cost thousands of dollars per month. Yeah, based on how big your team is and how you need to store content. And people are asking, like, why am I supposed to pay this much money for a tool like this? But it's not easy. Like, content management is a really complicated thing, because it's not just about storing some stuff in database. Yeah, it's about all the things around that actually make the content management feasible, that make it easy on the users, on the editors, on the developers, on everyone. And it's about making the best what we can out of the tool. Yeah, it's like you could say search is easy, right? You just do one query in the database. But here we have Algolia, here we have Azure Cognitive Services, and they actually have even AI-based algorithms, yeah, that actually anticipate what you want to search, and they pre-search what you need. So every service has their specifics, and content management is no different. There's a lot of things that we're working on. There is a lot of things that we want to improve. We have a really long backlog of things that we really want to do to help editors and developers in their daily work, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. So
yeah, definitely. And you're not just paying for, like, obviously a powerful and efficient tool, but there's like hours and hours of like work that you would originally have been paying engineers and content editors that you're like saving essentially. So it's kind of like you're transferring money over to something that's you can trust a little bit more as well. So is there anything else about like a headless CMS or about content that you wanted to mention? Because I know there's like an upcoming conference that's really interesting. So maybe that's a place where people can go to learn more as well.
Yes, definitely. So the business insights that we have, and the tech insights as well, we're always trying to compile them and find the best things that we've learned over the past year. And we're hosting a conference. It's called Content Horizons. It's horizons.content.ai, where you can find more information about that. And it's about content management as a whole. We have a lot of external speakers, interesting speakers from both worlds. We have Colleen Jones for the content management keynote. We have Jason Langsdorff, who's going to talk a bit more on the tech side of things. So it's definitely a great place to learn more about the aspects of content management, and maybe learn a bit more about the other side of the project. If you're a developer, I know from my experience, it's hard to see the point of view that content editors have, and vice versa. Content editors, they just tend to see the developer's job as a really easy thing. Well, it's not really like that. Yeah. So this is a great place where we're trying to join both personas, and we're also using that to show people what we are working on and how it may change their way of working. So yeah, if you have if you're interested in content management, definitely this could be a great event. It's on the 9th till 11th of November.
Oh, perfect. That's just in like a couple of weeks then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ondrej. We learned a lot from you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to learn more in the future as well. Yeah, I just wanted to pop in. I had this little sticker made earlier. So my company Career is coming out with this cute new graphic shirt, and I just wanted to plug that in. And your face was so happy and smiley in that picture that I had to throw that in there as well.
Yeah, this is actually a picture from about 5 years ago, so I still look the same. I see.
I love it. Oh my God. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really exciting to have you around today.
Thanks for having me anytime. I'll be happy to join again.